Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern today, and today I wanted to do another rework prediction video, this time talking about Nocturne. Now, Nocturne has been on a couple of different VGU polls held by Riot in the past, and Riot have basically said that Nocturne is one of those champions that a ton of newer players pick up, but who very few players end up sticking with after a few games. And their sort of assumption based on this is that Nocturne is a very cool character in terms of concept, but doesn't actually execute on any of it. They actually see Nocturne as a champion who has a lack of thematic resonance, more so than he has a lack of actual gameplay. And as a result of this, I think that there are some interesting things that they could do with Nocturne in the future, and some things that I think they aren't entirely accurate on. But let's go ahead and talk through Nocturne's kit very quickly, starting of course with the issues. The first is that Nocturne's kit is very difficult to fail with. His E is targeted, his Q is a fairly generous hitbox, and his R is targeted as well. His Q is also one of those abilities that looks like it shouldn't hurt as bad as it does. It's a very soft ability, and it does kind of feel like you lose a chunk of your health by getting hit by Nocturne Q, and you're sort of like, what happened? I feel like I shouldn't have taken that much damage from that kind of ability. Nocturne's a very auto-attack focused champion, which isn't the most interesting playstyle, even if it's very strong. The majority of what Nocturne does is walk at you and right-click, which, again, I'm not necessarily a fan of, especially because there's not a lot of outplay potential that's possible, and for an assassin-based character, that's really bad. And Shroud of Darkness is a thoroughly fine ability. I like the loop of blocking an attack and then getting more attack speed for it, but it's by far and away the least interesting part of Nocturne's kit, and I think it would be very easily abandoned by Riot if they so chose. Conversely, I think Nocturne has a ton of pros. I think Nocturne's kit plays very well together. Dustbringer gives him bonus movement speed to keep him in range of Unspeakable Horror long enough to get the Terrify, at which point he gets the bonus movement speed for being near a terrified enemy to keep him in range for auto attacks, which is quite nice. Umbra Blades constantly ticking down as he auto attacks means that he can get constant resets for it, which also then means that Nocturne's kit tells you what you're supposed to do with it, which is get into a fight and keep right-clicking a guy. And Shroud of Darkness plays into this a little bit due to not only the passive attack speed, but also due to blocking an ability to get more attack speed, therefore rewarding Nocturne for skillful play. I think his auto attack focused kit still has enough counterplay and dependency on his abilities that it's not as bad as something like Shyvana. Shyvana literally has to auto-attack for everything she does. Nocturne actually has things that he can fail at and which are important to fail at, right? Dustbringer can whiff, and then he can't really run you down. Unspeakable Horror has a tether range, which you can flash or dash out of range of. Then he doesn't have a real gap closer outside of his movement speed or his ultimate, therefore giving him sort of periods of downtime where he's an assassin that doesn't really have easy ways of getting to the target's backline. I also think, of course, that Paranoia is one of the most iconic abilities in League of Legends and needs absolutely no change. It's phenomenally cool, and Riot are not going to touch it at all in the slightest if they do eventually rework the champion. So where does this leave us with Nocturne? I've mentioned a couple of things that I dislike about Nocturne, but I generally like most of his kit. And to be completely honest, I don't know that he actually needs a full VGU. I think his concept is excellent, but it's unfortunately underexplored given his 10-year-old model and animations. I think that a lot of players see Nocturne splash art, they read that he's the eternal nightmare, he's this demon of nightmares, he's the scariest thing you could possibly see with your eyes closed, and then they play him in game and he's like a guy in a black morph suit with swords strapped to his wrists. That's not scary, that's not particularly cool or exciting, and they very quickly then fall off it because he's not delivering on the thematic potential more so than he's not delivering on the gameplay potential. I think Nocturne's gameplay is very good, but thematically is where he's sort of having issues. And if you can even think about this, Twitch comes to mind when I think about where Nocturne is at. Twitch was a very, very unpopular champion right up until he got his VGU, and then he catapulted in popularity to the point that he saw professional play, even though Riot hadn't shipped almost any buffs to go with his VGU. I think the only thing they did is they said, your Deadly Venom stacks don't fall off after you use your E. That's the only change they made mechanically to Twitch. And he was suddenly seeing professional play just because he looked better. I think that all they needed to do for Nocturne is just give him a full visual update, and you would be totally fine on this character. That said, because VGUs are all the difficult parts of an ASU, but also involve a little bit of extra work done for the kit, we may as well take a look at Nocturne's kit and see if there's anything else we could possibly do to fix his abilities. I think that if there's anything to change, I would love to swap out Nocturne's passive and W for abilities that are more satisfying to use, and which could pigeonhole him more into the Assassin mold than the Fighter mold. I feel like Assassin is healthier overall, especially given that Fighter Nocturne lacks a lot of the counterplay that Assassin Nocturne does. Fighter Nocturne is all about dive into the middle of the enemy team with a targeted gap closer and a spell shield in my back pocket, and then be tanky and do AoE damage and sustain a bunch through Umbra Blades, and generally it sort of doesn't work with a lot of the intended counterplay of Nocturne, which is that he is very squishy, and he's super dependent on that the Shroud of Darkness to keep himself safe while he goes for his assassination attempt, which is dependent on landing Dustbringer, getting the Terrify off of Unspeakable Horror. A lot of different things have to go right for it to succeed. On an Assassin Nocturne, Fighter Nocturne doesn't have that counterplay, and as a result, I would love to make some changes to his kit that make Fighter Nocturne either not as good, if unplayable at all. Which I think also works for the champion fantasy, right? Nocturne is a big, scary guy. He should be popping out of the darkness and murdering you instantly, not popping out of the darkness when you're in the middle of your team and slowly working you to death with his blades. That's not particularly thematically appropriate. As a result, I would love to replace Umbra Blades with an ability very similar to the old Lethal Tempo ability, where shortly after you enter combat, you gain a ton of bonus attack speed. Maybe you only trigger this after a target has been terrified, therefore Nocturne gets to you with his ultimate, he Dustbringers you, he does the Unspeakable Horror thing, and then the Terrify triggers, and all of a sudden now he's full on murder mode and just absolutely kills you under a hail of auto attacks. That way his kit is still auto attack focused, but it doesn't have some of the issues that Umbra Blades gives Nocturne with regards to the sustain and the sort of AoE damage. I think that this would be a much healthier way for Nocturne's kit to function as far as assassination attempts go, and it also means that Nocturne is an assassin with a slightly longer time to kill than something like a Rengar or a LeBlanc, who press all their buttons on you and kill you from stealth. This way, Nocturne is dependent on this steroid to actually murder you from there. He needs the Terrify to go off, or he needs to wait long enough for the steroid to activate in order to actually murder you, and I think therefore there's some counterplay inherently built into an ability like this. Meanwhile, W, I would love to see become a non-ultimate gap closer, which is sort of required if Nocturne intends to be an assassin. You have to have some way of getting to the backline, potentially without your ultimate, and so I would love to see some kind of ability that lets him actually close the distance. I would love to do something like, honestly, like Kane's ultimate, where Nocturne can go untargetable and sort of hover over a champion, potentially terrifying them as he exits, but Kane already has that ability, so he kind of ruined my thunder there. Instead, what I came up with was actually an Overwatch Reaper ability, right? So Reaper in Overwatch has an ability where he turns into a Wraith form. He can't attack, and he gets a slight amount of bonus movement speed, but he's also untargetable for the duration before he can fade back in whenever he chooses. I think this kind of ability would be very cool and thematically appropriate for Nocturne. Go untargetable, avoid enemy damage while you move, but you can't do anything in the meantime, and then you can fade back in whenever you want. Maybe that's after you've triggered your Lethal Tempo passive, right? You Dustbringer the target, you W in order to dodge their reprisal, and then by the time you fade back in, your attack speed bonus from your passive is activated. You can go for the Unspeakable Horror from there. There are some things that I think would make this ability work out quite well. It is very similar to Fizz-E, admittedly, but Fizz-E has the disadvantage of not allowing him to move while untargetable and having a damage component. This, I think, would probably not have a damage component. You're making up for that with the passive attack speed. And as a result, I think there's enough differentiation here that would probably work overall for Nocturne's kit. But functionally, I think really what Nocturne needs is just a visual facelift. I think that the changes I've talked about would do a good job of pigeonholing Nocturne more into the assassin role versus the fighter role, and would fix some of the issues with his kit, but generally speaking would keep the kit very similar to what it is on live, which I think is totally fine. Again, the problem with Nocturne is not his kit. I think the problem is his visuals, and I would love to see those updated. But let me know what you guys think of that down in the comment section below. If you actually like his visuals for whatever reason, or if you really hate his current kit and you would love to see him totally overhauled, let me know your ideas for abilities down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like, and if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I'll talk to you all later.